In 1637, a single flower bulb in Holland sold for the price of a canal house in Amsterdam. The bulb had a name. They called it Semper Augustus, 6,400 guilders, 20 to 40 years of wages for a skilled craftsman for a flower that bloomed for a week and then disappeared back into the ground. 3 months later, the same bulb had fallen more than 90% in value. That's not just a story about tulips. The pattern has repeated with different assets in every century since. Economists have a name for it. They have a 5-stage model, and you have probably been inside it at least once already in your life. To understand how an entire country chased a flower, start with what a tulip actually was in 1636. The tulip is native to Central Asia, cultivated by Ottoman Turks for centuries, brought to Western Europe in the 1550s by the Habsburg ambassador to Constantinople, planted in the first Dutch tulip garden in 1593 by a botanist named Carolus Clusius at the University of Leiden. For 40 years, it was a botanical curiosity for wealthy collectors. Then in the early 1630s, something changed. The Dutch had just emerged from the worst phase of their war with Spain. The Dutch East India Company was minting fortunes in spice. Amsterdam had become the wealthiest city in Europe. New merchants had new money and needed new ways to spend it. The tulip, exotic, bright, impossible to imitate with paint, became the status object. Bulbs are planted in autumn and bloom in spring. So most trading was futures style. Buyers paid for bulbs that were still in the ground. The transactions happened in tavern auctions called colleges across Dutch cities. For 2 years, prices rose steadily. In the autumn of 1636, prices started doubling every few weeks. By late January 1637, one rare bulb cost more than the average Dutch citizen earned in a decade. Then on the morning of February 3rd, 1637, at a routine futures auction in Haarlem, the bidders refused to bid. On paper, the case that bubbles can be useful makes sense. 5 clean arguments line up behind it. The financing argument. Bubbles fund real productive capacity that wouldn't otherwise be built. The 1870s railroad mania bankrupted thousands of investors, but the railroads got built. The dot-com bubble destroyed $5 trillion of paper wealth, but Amazon, Google, and the AWS infrastructure that powers half the internet survived. Even crashes leave residual productive capacity. The discovery argument, when a genuinely new asset class arrives, railroads, internet, electric vehicles, AI, its proper valuation is unknown. Prices have to be discovered, often through overshooting and correcting. Bubbles are how markets find equilibrium for things they've never priced before. The optionality argument, early participants in successful bubbles can produce extraordinary wealth. Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, Mark Zuckerberg, early entrants in what looked like bubbles at the time, became among the wealthiest people on Earth. Survivorship is uneven, but it is real. The coordination argument. Bubbles concentrate attention and capital on emerging technologies far faster than rational allocation would. Even when most projects fail, the surviving ones can be civilization-defining. The institutional restraint argument. Modern central banks, deposit insurance, circuit breakers, and capital requirements have reduced the systemic damage of bubble collapses since 1929. Crashes still happen. They rarely destroy real economies anymore. The 2008 financial crisis being the major exception. 5 arguments, none of them wrong. This episode isn't an indictment of bubbles or speculation or markets. It's a structural observation about a specific gap, the gap between the popular framing. Smart people don't fall for bubbles and the documented historical record. Bubbles are a recurring property of financial systems, and the human cognitive architecture that makes them happen is the same one operating in you right now. Picture the trade as it actually happened, not in a textbook, in the tavern auction room. The boom, late 1636, wealthy Amsterdam merchant, new money from spice trade. He's seen his neighbor buy a rare bulb for 200 guilders in October and resell it for 500 in November. He buys his first bulb in December, 800 guilders. By mid-January 1637, the same bulb in his garden is being offered 3,000. He doesn't sell. The price is still rising weekly. The euphoria, late January. Tulip trading has moved from elite gardens to tavern auctions. Documented participants, roughly 5,000 traders across Dutch cities. Most are wealthy merchants and skilled professionals. Of those 5,000, only 37 are documented as having paid more than 300 guilders, about a year of a carpenter's wages, for a single bulb. But for those 37, the prices are extraordinary. Semper Augustus changes hands at 6,400 guilders, Viceroy at 4,200, Admiral van der Eyck at 1,500, a modest Amsterdam canal house at this time, 2,500 to 3,000 guilders, a luxury canal house 10,000. Semper Augustus is worth approximately 2 modest canal houses per bulb. The panic, February 3rd, 1637, at a routine tavern auction in Haarlem, the opening bid for a rare bulb finds no buyer. The dealer lowers it, still no buyer, the auction is abandoned. News travels city to city by horseback. Within a week, similar auctions across Holland are failing. Traders refuse to honor their futures contracts. Within 6 weeks, prices have fallen 90 to 95%. In April 1637, the states of Holland decree that tulip contracts can be settled by paying 3.5% of the contract price. Effectively, sellers get pennies on the guilder. The matter is legally closed. By 1638, tulip prices have stabilized at 1 to 5% of peak. They remain there for the rest of the 17th century. That's the boom, the euphoria, and the panic. 4 months, end to end. Now multiply that pattern by every century since. Most people picture tulip mania as a funny story about Dutch merchants who lost their minds over flowers. Underneath that story, 3 structural insights, 3 different centuries. Name what is actually happening. Mechanism 1. In 1841, Scottish journalist Charles Mackay, Mackay, published Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Men, it has been well said, think in herds. They go mad in herds. Mackay collected case studies, tulip mania, the South Sea bubble, the Mississippi bubble, witch hunts, alchemy. He saw that the same social mechanism produced collective irrationality across very different subjects. His book became the founding text of bubble analysis. But his account of tulip mania was, in significant parts, exaggerated. Mechanism 2. In 2007, historian Anne Goldgar of King's College London, published the first deep archival study of the actual 1637 event. Her findings rewrote the textbook. No documented bankruptcies caused by tulips, not one. The Dutch economy continued booming through the 1640s. Roughly 5,000 mostly wealthy participants, 37 of whom made the truly extreme bids. The sailor who supposedly ate a bulb, not in any 17th century Dutch source. Mackay had relied on Calvinist moralizing pamphlets, propaganda treated as history. The mania was real. The catastrophe was largely myth. But the structural mechanism, futures trading, price detachment, cascade collapse, was all real. Just at a smaller, more localized scale than the popular story tells. Mechanism 3. In 1986, American economist Hyman Minsky proposed what is now called the Financial Instability Hypothesis. The model that connects 1637 to today, 5 stages of a speculative bubble. 1. Displacement. A real exogenous shock creates new opportunity. For tulips, an exotic flower from Constantinople. For .com, the internet. For 2008, cheap mortgages. 2. Boom. Prices rise. Profits attract more entrants. 3. Euphoria. Prices accelerate. This time is different, dominates. Valuation metrics are abandoned. 4. Profit taking. Sophisticated participants quietly exit. 5. Panic, a trigger, often invisible at the time, accelerates exits. Forced selling cascades through leveraged positions. The model fits tulip mania exactly. Displacement, TBV infected broken bulbs. Boom. 1634 to 36. Euphoria. Late 1636. Profit taking. Late January. Panic. February 3rd. It also fits 1929. 1989. Japan2000.com. 2008 housing. 2022 NFTs. 3 mechanisms. 3 different centuries. 1. Repeating 5-stage cycle. Mackay named it. Goldgar corrected the record. Minsky modeled what was happening. And the model still works. This episode is sponsored by my own private community. If Minsky's 5 stages made you want to recognize which stage you are inside of right now, this is built for it. A community where I work through over 100,000 applied breakdowns, how to map current asset classes against the Minsky cycle, where stage 4 signals appear in actual price action, when a Minsky moment is announcing itself versus a normal correction, not theory, applied to live markets. Link is in the description below. All right, back to the diagnosis. Once you see the mechanism, the rest of the story is what bubbles cost when they go through stage 5. Tulip mania, 1637, approximately 5,000 documented traders, mostly wealthy. Few documented total bankruptcies. The Dutch Golden Age continued. Damage real but contained. The 1929 crash. The Dow Jones fell from 381 in September 1929 to 41 in July 1932. An 89% decline. U.S. GDP fell 30% over 4 years. Unemployment peaked at 25%. 9,000 banks failed. The crash triggered the Great Depression. The worst economic catastrophe in modern history. The Japan asset bubble. December 1989, the Nikkei index peaked at 38,915. Tokyo real estate was so expensive that at the peak, the Imperial Palace grounds were valued at tens of billions of dollars per square mile. The Nikkei did not exceed its 1989 peak until February 2024, a 34-year recovery. The dot-com bubble NASDAQ peaked at 5,048 in March 2000, fell to 1,114 by October 2002, a 78% decline, $5 trillion of paper wealth destroyed. The U.S. housing bubble. Case-Shiller National Index peaked July 2006. National prices fell roughly 33%, 50% or more in Phoenix, Miami, Las Vegas. $11 trillion in U.S. household wealth destroyed. Lehman Brothers collapsed. The Fed and Treasury deployed trillions in emergency facilities. 10 million U.S. homes were foreclosed between 2006 and 2014. The NFT bubble. Bored Ape Yacht Club floor price peaked at $429,000 per token in April 2022. By late 2024, around 30,000. A 94% decline in 30 months. OpenSea NFT trading volume fell from $5 billion a month to under $500 million. 6 bubbles, 4 centuries, different assets, different participants, different technologies. The Minsky 5-stage cycle in everyone. 1637 tulips, 2022 JPEGs, same mechanism, same math. Once you see the mechanism in full, the asset class stops mattering. Tulips, South Sea Company shares, Florida swampland, radio stocks, Tokyo real estate, pets.com, Miami condos, Bitcoin, Bored apes. The asset is the vector. The mechanism is in human cognition. What changes across centuries? The technology, the asset, the participants, the speed of the cycle. What does not change? The social proof cascade. Humans copying each other, the leverage compounding, bigger bets than cash on hand allows, the narrative justification. This time is different. The 5-stage Minsky sequence. The 70 to 95% collapse range when it ends. For an individual participant, this means 3 things. There is no exit from the bubble cognition you are wired with. The same heuristics that make you good at coordinating with peers in normal life are the heuristics that pull you into bubbles when prices are rising. Episode 1.4 covered this in detail. There is no immune asset class. Bubbles can form in any asset where supply is constrained, leverage is available, and a narrative justifies price increases. Stocks, real estate, commodities, currencies, art, sports cards, sneakers, watches, cryptocurrencies, all have hosted, documented bubbles. There is no warning bell that everyone hears at the same time. The Minsky moment trigger is usually invisible until after it happens. Investors who exit before the panic do so because of their own discipline, knowing the 5 stages by name, not because of some unambiguous market signal. Every generation swears it is smarter than the last. Every generation finds its own tulip. Recognizing which stage you are inside of in real time is the entire game. 3 operational rules to take from this. Rule 1. Bubbles always have a story. Listen for "this time is different." Every bubble in history has been justified by a narrative that the current asset is fundamentally different from previous bubbles. .com. The internet changes everything. Housing, real estate always goes up. NFTs, digital scarcity is a new asset class. When you hear this exact category of argument applied to an asset whose price has risen sharply over a short window, you are listening to Minsky Stage 3. Note the stage. Don't sell because of it. Note it. Rule 2. Map the leverage. Bubbles cannot grow large without leverage. Tulip futures, margin loans, home equity, crypto DeFi lending. When the asset you are watching is being bought with borrowed money, not just personal credit cards, but instruments structured to amplify exposure, the system is in stage 3 or 4. The collapse mechanism is loaded, the trigger is uncertain. Rule 3, the exit is a personal discipline, not a market signal. There is no horn that blows 3 days before a crash. The Minsky moment is identified after the fact, not in advance. Investors who exit bubbles successfully do so on personal discipline rules. I sell when my gains exceed X. I sell when I see profit-taking coverage in 3 financial publications. I sell when my taxi driver gives me stock tips. Write your rule down before you need it. Use it without negotiating with yourself. These are operational rules, not philosophical ones. They don't prevent bubbles. They give you a way to participate in one without being the one left standing when the music stops. In 1637, a flower bulb in Holland sold for the price of a canal house in Amsterdam. They called it Semper Augustus. 3 months later, it was worth pennies on the guilder. 8 billion people now wake up every morning inside an economic system whose price discovery mechanism for any asset where supply is constrained and leverage is available has been repeating the same 5-stage cycle since at least 1637. Mackay named the pattern in 1841. Goldgar corrected the historical record in 2007. Minsky modeled the mechanism in 1986, and the model still works. Every generation has its tulip. The trick is naming the stage you are in while you are still in it. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe. There's a lot of math worth understanding. Numbers don't lie, but they don't explain themselves either.